My son was diagnosed with severe OCD and BBD, which is body dysmorphia. When it started when he was 13, he was bullied at school. Very talented young man, very bright, had lots of hobbies, interests, was doing very well at school. And unfortunately, the bullying caused him to have depression and anxiety, and for the OCD to basically take over his life to the extent that he couldn't go out, he couldn't intermix with people, he couldn't read anymore, he couldn't write, he couldn't wear clothes. The list is endless. We got him. We first of all applied to CAMHS, which weren't very effective. With Jack at that time, he was 13, 14 years of age, and the help they offered wasn't appropriate for a child of his needs, and things escalated. He then ended up being treated at the Maudsley in South London, at the Special OCD Disorders Clinic. From there we fought and we got him into the Priory in South London. He was 15 when he went into the Priory, and he was there for just under a year, which again, the system let him down. They didn't have the staff or the means to deal with him appropriately, and he was more or less kicked out of there after 10 months and left. Within this time he deteriorated, felt very hopeless. There was also, to be fair, a lot going on within the family. Myself and his father were in the middle of a divorce, which obviously didn't help. And it resulted in Jack being taken into a very specialist centre, one of the only specialist centres in the world in London, called Bethlem, which was highly, highly recommended. They did a documentary on television about it, the Bedlam. It used to be called, it's now called Bethlem. But unfortunately, he progressed quite well initially, and then the authorities deemed that they couldn't afford to keep him there anymore. And on hearing this information, he panicked and he ran away. And we had no idea where he was whatsoever. He had no contact with anybody. And then months and months and months later, my elder son managed to contact his social worker, who thought that Ben knew what had happened to Jack because somebody had signed in to visit him in hospital under my elder son's name. So she, without realising, gave him the information that Jack had been in St Thomas's Hospital for a week in London after taking a massive overdose of paracetamol in a park. Obviously it was heart-rending. There's no words to describe how it made myself and the rest of our family feel. We didn't even know. Thank God somebody found him. It was a paramedic who, well, it wasn't, it was a member of the public found him and called 999, and thank God, you know, they got there in time. But from what I know, Jack has since discussed this with me in quite a lot of detail, and he was a very lucky young man because he had taken an awful lot of drugs and he was in hospital for over a week. So they really did find it quite hard to get it out of his system. But this isn't uncommon in people with these particular anxiety disorders, and I think people have to sit up and realise that although we all have certain elements of anxiety, certain OCDs even, when it becomes the main control in your life, it makes life not worth living, and that's what happened with my son. but thank God now he's gone through the mill. Even since then, was sectioned back in August of this year, due to the fact that he just wasn't looking after himself and wasn't able to. He'd stopped eating and taking meds, etc. But this actually made him open up finally and allowed me to be part of his life again, whereas he'd cut us all out beforehand. And I've managed to get him into a rehab facility in Harrow, and I'm glad to say that he's progressing, be it very slowly. He's 21 now, but he talks quite openly about his suicide attempt and about how desperate he was and about how he couldn't see a tomorrow, and all he felt he was doing was being a liability to people and making people upset and hurting people, not thinking about how much he's loved and how many good qualities he has, and how this is an illness, this is something that he can't help. And I think that what he did in the park that day was a cry for help, but also I think that he had come to that stage where every door seemed closed to him and there didn't seem anywhere else to go. Jack was a performer. He was artistic, so he performed on stage to quite a high level. He was on the television quite a few times, and he was very talented. And that is, I think, what escalated his problems, because on the stage he was so phenomenal, but he really did become that person to such a degree, and he had such charisma. You couldn't take it. And that's not his mum talking. I used to sit and hear people I didn't know around me in the audience saying, God, that boy, you know. But I think in the end, he was acting in his everyday life. He'd just be whoever everybody else wanted him to be, and I think he forgot himself along the way. And I think that is what, you know, is so hard. But yeah, you wouldn't wish it on. I mean, I've had to have quite a bit of time off at work, especially because that was the day before my 50th birthday. He did that. He was sectioned. It was just horrific.